Your Excellencies, Reverend Fathers, distinguished professors, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I apologize for not being present with you physically in Leuven at this conference today, but because my travel documents were not ready, so I couldn't travel outside of Ukraine. But thanks to technology, I'm still able to deliver my presentation to you today. It is a great honor for me to be speaking in front of such a distinguished audience. More so, an honor is to be speaking about one of the giants of the 20th century, our beloved Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky. As you can see it from the pamphlet of the program, the topic of my presentation is an avant-garde ecumenical thought of Metropolitan Andrey Sheptytsky. But before I start presenting to you my research, which by the way was an incredibly rich learning experience for myself, let me share a short personal story with you which has to do with our beloved Metropolitan Sheptytsky. This past September, I had a friend of mine come from Israel and visit me in Lviv in Ukraine. He was on a short business trip to Ukraine and his first stop was Lviv. And of course I wanted to have a nice program for him arranged because it was the first time that he came to Ukraine. And in Lviv there is so much to see. And by the way, if you have not been to Lviv, I strongly invite all of you to come and see our beautiful city. And we have more than 100 active churches in Lviv. As it usually happens, the flight of my friend was delayed, so when he came to Lviv, we had to shorten the program for him. The guide who was supposed to show him around the city, she decided to shorten the program, and one of the things that she wanted to skip was the visit to the tomb of Metropolitan Sheptytsky, which is in the crypt of St. George's Cathedral. When Menachem, this is the name of my Jewish friend, he learned about this decision, he was totally outraged. He said something like this: "To hell, no, we are not skipping the tomb of the great Metropolitan Sheptytsky." Those words have really left an impression on me, because first of all, they were spoken by a Jew, and secondly, they were spoken 150 years after the birth of Metropolitan Sheptytsky. And this fact, it tells us about what kind of influence Sheptytsky had and continues to have upon not only within his own community, not only within his own Greek Catholic Church, not only within his own religion, Christianity, but it tells us about what kind of influence he has upon the leaders, upon the followers of other religions. In this case, it was the Jews. And it is a great honor for me today to make the ecumenical thought of Sheptytsky known to a wider public. It must be said in the beginning of my presentation that it is anachronistic even to use the term ecumenical or ecumenism when we describe events or persons prior to the Second Vatican Council. The beginning of the 20th century saw a very negative and pessimistic view of the Catholic Church towards the movement known today as ecumenism. If one, for example, is to look at the papal encyclical Mortalium Animus from 1928 of Pope Pius XI, one could get a very negative understanding of what was meant by religious unity and what role the Catholic Church should have had in promoting this unity. In fact, some of the words of Pope Pius XI seem too harsh and condemning for any reader today. This being said, I would also like to quote Cardinal Lubomir Huzar, who said the following in regard to seeing Sheptytsky as a pioneer of ecumenism and forerunner of the Second Vatican Council. I'm quoting: "Obviously, Metropolitan Sheptytsky was not an ecumenist that in the sense that we understand an ecumenist to be today in light of the teachings of the Second Vatican Council. However, he was a pioneer who tried to overcome division and difficulties. Most of the time, in doing so, he was left alone, without any official guidelines and directives. Sometimes he was acting contrary to what seemed to be the official teaching of the highest hierarchy and authority of the Church." End of quote. The historic period in which Metropolitan Andrew lived was marked by the rule of the Russian Empire, the Second Polish Republic, the Nazi Germany, and the Soviet Union. In one of his very first pastoral letters that he wrote when he became bishop in 1899 was his letter to the faithful of the eparchy of Stanisławiv, today's Ivano-Frankivsk, in the western Ukraine. It is striking that already in the beginning of his ministry, Sheptytsky was well aware of the necessity to bring all of the faithful together, addressing their spiritual as well as their material needs and circumstances. It is with sorrow that Sheptytsky mentions the division of churches, and he calls upon the faithful to pray earnestly for the restoration of unity. So he not only mentions the division of the churches, but he offers a spiritual remedy to this problem: prayer and knowledge. These two principles, prayer and knowledge, will be fundamental for the rest of his life and for his mission as a pastor of the church. This is what Sheptytsky writes in his letter. If we love our people, we must stick firmly to our Holy Catholic Church. Be sure that it is only within this church, by the will of God, that we will flourish and we will realize our vocation given to us by God. We Catholics of the Eastern Rite are called by God to bring to the true Catholic faith those brothers who are not with us and who do not belong to the church. Pray for the unity of all God's churches and remember them in your prayers. Bishop Andrey continues by saying that the best sign and the best gesture towards reconciliation is charity and example. I'm quoting, "To those brothers who are not united with us, give them your best example of how to live a good Christian life. Your Christian virtues and charity above all should become the signs of authenticity of your faith. Know the difference between our traditions and do not accept any falsehoods, but rather show them true and authentic Christian love." End of quote. So the first step towards reconciliation and the goal of unity should be the renewal of spiritual friendship among Catholic and Orthodox. Of course, this is the task that not only some selected individuals should do, but this is the task of the whole community, of the whole ecclesia, to work constantly in promoting this friendship. Sheptytsky strongly believed that either failure or success to build such spiritual links affects the whole universal church as well. Renewal of spiritual friendship can take place under two circumstances: prayer and intellectual knowledge. A Christian is someone who prays and someone who can and should reflect on the meaning of Christianity, the truths of faith, and God's plan of salvation. Much of Sheptytsky's thought on the spiritual dimension of interchurch relations has been echoed in the teachings of the Second Vatican Council, and this is what Unitatis Redintegratio says in chapters 7 and 8. I'm quoting, "There can be no ecumenism worthy of the name without a change of heart, for it is from renewal of the inner life of our minds, from self-denial and unstinted love, that desires of unity take rise and develop in a mature way. We should therefore pray to the Holy Spirit for the grace of genuinely self-denying, humble, gentle service of others, and to have an attitude of brotherly generosity towards them. This change of heart and holiness of life, along with the public and private prayer for the unity of Christians, should be regarded as the soul of the whole ecumenical movement and merits the name spiritual ecumenism." As regards prayer, in the mind of Sheptytsky, prayer should be both personal and collective. The prayer for unity should be something that all priests have in their churches, and Sheptytsky invokes priests, in fact, to preach on the subject of unity for Christians. He asks Christians, and the priest especially, to explain dogmatics, theology, and spirituality behind the prayer for Christian unity so that people know what they are praying for. Today, we can be really impressed how deeply Sheptytsky understood the unionistic or ecumenical mission of his church. The work of unity is not one's own initiative, and it cannot be ascribed only to some individuals. According to Sheptytsky, the whole ecclesial community, all of the faithful of the church, are responsible for the holy task of unity. This unity, under the leadership of the successor of Peter, should be the object of our prayers and our most burning desire, as Sheptytsky repeats many times. According to the Metropolitan, the search for unity cannot undermine one's own identity. In fact, in his approach, he constantly asks his priests to explain the truths of faith, and even those truths which seem to be contradictory to the Orthodox. For example, here he had in mind some truths such as Immaculate Conception and the primacy of the Roman Pontiff. The faithful should need to know how to distinguish the Catholic Church by its main mark, unity and Catholicity or universality. This unity, or единство in Ukrainian, is best expressed by universal authority of the successor of Peter, who is the sign of unity and protector of unity at the same time. A third thing that the newly appointed bishop asks of his faithful is to show charity. As he himself writes, "If you are good Christians and if you behave in a way worthy of being called Christians, then you will achieve glory for the Church of Christ. and if you misbehave, you will bring about shame and sorrow for the Church. After over 60 years, this is what Vatican II will express in Unitatis Redintegratio number 4. I'm quoting, "Catholics in their ecumenical work must assuredly be concerned for their separated brethren, praying for them, keeping them informed about the Church, making the first approaches toward them. But their primary duty is to make a careful and honest appraisal of whatever needs to be done or renewed in the Catholic household itself, in order that its life may bear witness more clearly and faithfully to the teachings and institutions which have come to it from Christ through the apostles." End of quote. Today, we are so much accustomed to official documents and statements of various theological international commissions and gatherings which produce tons of literature on ecumenism and ecumenical relationship. Oftentimes, the commissions even offer statements which tell us how to interpret correctly previously published documents. And too often, there is a feeling that the aim of ecumenism is to publish documents and to issue statements. Sheptytsky, however, he goes to the very root of the problems and he encourages his faithful to conduct a virtuous Christian living. And this is truly amazing what he does. Because Sheptytsky, he combines pastoral theology, he combines spirituality, even canon law, and he does not see them as separate fields, but he sees them as one thing, and he believes that the way one lives his or Christian life has an influence on the others, and especially on those who are not part of the Church. Finally, when it comes to the Orthodox themselves, Sheptytsky uses the term to bring them to unity. He never uses the term conversion or to convert the Orthodox. Obviously, Sheptytsky regarded the Orthodox Church as a true church, although not in union or unity with the Catholic Church. And this is truly amazing and revolutionary before any official teaching of the Catholic Church. As regards the unionistic or ecumenical activity of Metropolitan Andrew, it must be said that he himself perfectly understood and accurately described the results and the impact that the division had on the Ukrainian people. In one of his writings, he says, "I believe that there is no people on earth that has suffered so much from the division of churches as our dear Ukrainian people." Pondering about the 16th century union and its impact on the internal life of the Church, Sheptytsky asks himself a question: is it possible to be Eastern and Catholic at the same time? And if, in the beginning of the 20th century, most theologians would answer in negative, Sheptytsky was strongly convinced that being Eastern and Catholic is not only possible, but is also desirable for promoting the cause of unity of the Catholic and Orthodox churches. The way that the Eastern Catholic churches could become real agents of change in the renewal was the renewal of Eastern traditions and the treasure of the many holy martyrs who died for the cause of unity. In this way, we can see the beginnings of what later became labeled as Ecumenism of martyrs and saints. Actually, it would be John Paul II who would say the following in his letter Tertio Millennio Adveniente in 1994. I'm quoting, "Perhaps the most convincing form of ecumenism is the ecumenism of the saints and the martyrs. The communio sanctorum speaks louder than the things which divide us." End of quote. Another important step in Sheptytsky's strive for unity can be seen in his letter addressed to the Orthodox bishops in Ukraine. According to this letter, both the Orthodox and the Catholic hierarchs must take into consideration the deep and authentic desire for unity present in the hearts of the many of their faithful. Moreover, Sheptytsky insists that the hierarchy, as a divine institution whose authority comes directly from Christ himself, must act, I'm quoting, "in accordance with the will of Christ, in the Orthodox faith, and with the Catholic charity, which encompasses all people. We must find out the way of purifying our hearts and our prayers." Unity is something that all of the baptized Christians are called to work on in a spirit of brotherhood and spirituality. As Pope Benedict XVI said a few years ago, ecumenical dialogue can be only developed in the context of authentic spirituality. We cannot reach unity using our human resources. We can only receive the gift of unity, which is the gift of the Holy Spirit. In the spiritual ecumenism, prayer, holiness, and change of mind constitute the heart of ecumenical dialogue. End of quote. On the practical level, the approach of Metropolitan Andrey towards the problem of division lied first of all in making an order inside his own church, preserving and fostering unity with the Apostolic See. Much of his thought regarding this subject and the role of the church has been seen in his famous pastoral letter from 1941 entitled "How to Build One's Own Home." It is here that we can find some practical directives and guidelines that Sheptytsky provides for his clergy and people. Among the priorities that Sheptytsky saw in the renewal of the life of his church were the renewal of Eastern monasticism, Eastern theology, and liturgical life of the church. During his whole life, Sheptytsky tirelessly worked on all of those directions, preparing the Studai Typicon, Ukrainian Liturgicon, and founding the Theological Academy in Lviv. In his pastoral letter addressed to the clergy and titled "The Times Are Coming," dated from 1907, Sheptytsky writes the following: "The times are coming in which we will, without any doubt, be called to a very important and difficult task of unity of Eastern churches. This work of unity is a true ideal and it corresponds to our burning desires. The clergy of our province, as called by divine providence, can and should serve the universal church, the bride of Christ. Already the fact of our geographical position between East and West requires us to fulfill our duty. As we are connected with the West by our faith and with the East by our right, we, as no one else, have the duty and responsibility to work for the great cause of restoring the Church's unity." In the mind of Sheptytsky, this geographical position of Ukraine and our church is an external stimulus for us to work for the unity of the churches. It can be seen as merely a physical fact or a cultural, symbolical fact, where the church is a sort of a uniting bridge linking the two traditions together. If the Eastern churches and Eastern Catholics know their traditions and they understand the Western approach in theology, they can become a sort of mediators between East and West. Mutual knowledge destroys barriers and lays down a foundation for understanding and reconciliation. A similar idea is also expressed by Sheptytsky during the inauguration of the Theological Academy in Lviv on October 6, 1929. These were his words: "The geographical position of our land and of our churches requires of us to act like a mediator between East and West. The task of working for unity is an essential mission to our church. The East should be allowed to learn about the West, and the West should learn about the East." On the other hand, Sheptytsky is also well aware of the delicacy and complexity of the problems related to the church's geographical position. Being in between the two often creates tensions, misunderstandings, and blames. As he himself put it, I'm quoting, "Our standing in the middle is without a doubt connected with great obstacles. For the one standing in between the two who are arguing and fighting can himself become an object of insult and quarrel. For even a friend who loves his friend for whom he is standing for in fight might wound his friend in the battle and confusion. Our situation is not an exception to the rule." End of quote. In what concerns Sheptytsky's own understanding of what it meant to be Catholic, it must be said that one of the issues he stresses all over again is the issue connected with the main truths of faith, or dogmas. The content of faith, as professed by the faithful, is one of the signs of belonging to the Universal Catholic Church under the Roman Pontiff. The main sign of the Church being Catholic is that it is actually guided by the Roman Pontiff, whose authority is infallible. This is what Sheptytsky writes in regard to this. The Catholicity of the Catholic character of the Church is best shown in the fact that there is the universal rule of the Roman Pontiff, whose authority is infallible, and there can be no unity among Christians in faith and love unless there is the authority of the Roman Pontiff. It is of primary importance that in conscience of our faithful there be the truth that our belonging to the Pope is equal or even stronger than the truth of belonging to our Eastern Holy Rite. Another important aspect of Sheptytsky's understanding of one's identity and belonging is how he describes the identity of Eastern Catholics. He says, "We are united with the West by our faith and with the East by our rite." This unity of faith implies that the Church has preserved all of the teachings of the Church, universal, undivided, and it can and that it has cherished this great treasure of tradition. Unity in rite, on the other hand, is more than just a ritual resemblance or mere copy of what the Orthodox do. It implies the inner being expressed by the outward manner, and this is something that the Eastern Church has been connected to the Orthodox Church continually. In this way, the Eastern Catholic Church can enrich the Western Church by another way of expressing the same faith in the same God. What was the attitude of Metropolitan Andrey towards Church Union of Brest-Litovsk? Of course, Metropolitan Andrey saw this union as positive. This union was a common decision taken by the Synod of Bishops. Against the internal and external pressure, this decision was free, and afterwards, those bishops they did not take any measures against the ones which did not sign the union. Some see those who signed the articles as traitors, but Sheptytsky clearly states that they are not to be blamed for any wrongdoings. These are his own words. I'm quoting. The Union of Brest, in spite of some disagreements and disputes, brought a renewal of religiosity and piety in the Ukrainian Church. In the face of all problems of the time, the Kievan Metropolia had enough internal support and strength to strengthen itself and even to flourish to a certain degree. In the times of persecution in the Tsarist Russian Empire, many of the Eastern Catholics bore witness to their Catholic faith while preserving faithfulness to the Apostolic See. Union became an integral part of the religious, natural, and cultural life, and it definitely benefited the people. End of quote. In the writings of Metropolitan Sheptytsky, it is clear that the concept of Church's unity comprises some fundamental truths. One of such truths is the recognition of the role of the successor of Peter, the Pope, as the uniting principle of the visible Church of Christ. According to Sheptytsky, recognition of the Pope as the head of the Church implies two important things. First of all, this would guarantee the authenticity of the Christian doctrine and belief, and secondly, this would also make the Church less vulnerable to foreign intrusions by state or civil authorities in the ecclesial matters. The history of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, of which Sheptytsky was a pastor and archbishop, experienced many of such foreign intrusions, of which he was well aware of. Of course, Sheptytsky was also aware of the fact that union, or unia, did not resolve all of the problems related to the unity of the Church. However, he was strongly convinced that the unia of 1596, if implemented and lived in the correct way, it could be an effective means to reach an overall unity between Catholics and the Orthodox. In his speech on the occasion of the inauguration of the National Museum in Lviv in 1913, this is what he said about the unia and the rebirth of the Church. I'm quoting. In the collection of our museum, we have writings and mitres and the cross of the holy martyr Josaphat, who died for the cause of the Holy Unia. We also have a collection of manuscripts and letters of Metropolitan Rutsky. Such precious items and other witnesses of the Unia are not buried somewhere in the grave or hidden in a box. All of them guide us in the process of the ecclesial renaissance and rebirth of our culture. They are part of our identity. We do not need any foreign culture and identity to be imposed on us, and we need to preserve our holy traditions. So alongside the faithfulness to the traditions of Eastern identity, Metropolitan Andrey was also conscious of some of the changes in the Western society. His flexibility in some things, his great intelligence and openness to the Holy Spirit working in the world are testified by the following words that he pronounced at the Congress in Lviv in 1936. I'm quoting. It is obvious and clear that in the light of some of the changes among Western Christians, we Easterners have to slowly adapt to them as well. If we do not try at least to adjust to those changes, we will become more estranged and foreign to our Western brothers and to the whole Catholic Church. The reason why it is necessary and just to adjust to new concepts and ideas is because it was the Holy Fathers and the popes themselves that request the new intellectual movements to be welcomed and cherished. It is because of such papal appeals and in light of the Holy Unity that we need to study, discuss, and debate over important questions arising from reading our liturgical and ecclesial literature. End of quote. How can this unity be achieved? As was already mentioned, in the mind of Metropolitan Andrey, the best tools to achieve unity are self-sacrifice linked with prayer and charity. Here we can see the spiritual dimension, the spiritual grandeur of Metropolitan Sheptytsky. Another important aspect of inter-church relation is the study of patristics, both Eastern and Western. In his pastoral letters and homilies, Sheptytsky constantly invites his faithful and especially his clergy to the apostolic work of study. Intellectual ignorance for him is one of the worst things. Metropolitan suggests that his theologians not waste time and strength on all possible subjects, but rather they should focus on some problematic issues and applies their strength and to understand those issues. He says that one should engage seriously in the study, not only because after study in intellectual capacity it's the second highest ideal of Christian life, but because knowledge and wisdom have no room for prejudices and ignorance, but they pave the way to understanding and mutual knowledge. This is what Sheptytsky writes in one of his pastoral letters. Let every generation of our clergy prepare a few people dedicated to God and to sacred science, and in this way our whole church will grow in holiness and wisdom, and we will be able to dedicate ourselves more firmly and with all our strength and might to the great cause of unity. One of the greatest unionistic or ecumenical achievements of Sheptytsky was to initiate and take part in the Belgrade Congress meetings starting with 1907. Those meetings in Belgrade, a symbolic city with the burial of Saint Methodius, the apostle of the Slavs, they can be indeed considered as revolutionary prior to the Second Vatican Council. The main goal of the Belgrade meetings was the rapprochement between the Catholics and the Orthodox theologians, and who dedicated their time and study of the two mentalities, breaking psychological barriers between the two traditions. In the mind of Sheptytsky, if we are to reach unity, we must get to know each other better, understand each other, and love each other. There is no other way. If we analyze the efforts of the meetings in Belgrade, it is really amazing what was achieved during those meetings. We have to keep in mind that at that time, actually, there was no ecumenical model for the unity of the churches. All that the members of the meetings had in front of them was any previously achieved union through the Council of Florence, Lyon, or the Union of Brest-Litovsk in 1596. And as one of the scholars who studied the Belgrade meetings, Augustin Babyak, wrote, I'm quoting, "In spite of all the political, social, material, and spiritual difficulties of the time, the perseverance of the participants of the Belgrade meetings and their fidelity to the unionistic project must not go unnoticed and appreciated in history." Much of the unionistic or ecumenical efforts of Metropolitan Andrey were directed to the clergy and faithful of his own church. However, it must be said that Sheptytsky has worked a lot to improve the relation between his church and the Orthodox Church. It is worthy of notice to regard the fact that when the Orthodox population of Poland was being persecuted and looked down upon by the Polish state authorities, Sheptytsky, unlike any Catholic hierarch in Poland at the time, he took courage and he issued a special pastoral letter defending the Orthodox in the face of injustice. He clearly states that such actions will widen the gap between the churches and they will destroy any noble and warm feelings that Orthodox might have had towards the Catholics. Actually, it was this brave defense of the Orthodox in Poland in 1938 that earned him a lot of respect among the Orthodox. According to Sheptytsky, one of the main obstacles for unity is indifferentism. This indifferentism was observed by Sheptytsky on all of the three sides. On the Catholic side, many people did not care to know about the East and the Orthodoxy. On the Orthodox side, many people did not bother to learn about the Catholic Church, and on the Greek Catholic side, many faithful and even clergy did not show signs of interest in promoting interchurch relationships. Sheptytsky clearly states that the work of Christian unity is a moral obligation on the part of all baptized Christians. Another hindrance in the work for unity for Sheptytsky was the soteriological exclusivism. Although he did believe that unity with the Roman Pontiff was a sign of one's belonging to the Church of Christ, he never denied that the Orthodox Church was a true church as well. He was against any idea that saw the Orthodox as unequal and less worthy than the Catholic. Although in his ecclesiological evaluation of the Orthodox Church he did not come to understanding of sister churches, he definitely was very close to this concept. Among the writings of Metropolitan Andrew that can help us understand better his concept of unity of the Church is his pastoral letter from 1938. Its title is About Unity of the Church. The letter was written on the occasion of the Feast of the Three Saints and the 50th anniversary of the coronation of Pope Pius XI. The underlying theme of this writing is that unity of the Church can be expressed in many different ways. The best way, however, to express the unity of the Church is the communion of saints. By celebrating our saints, we, as if partake in their saintly life, we become partakers in this whole communion, and we taste the heavenly life of the saints. Sheptytsky is very much a theologian when he explains such lofty theological concepts. In his work, he constantly turns to the Holy Scriptures and the works of the Fathers of the Church to support his words. The Church on earth is the continuation of the heavenly Church. It is the resemblance of the heavenly Jerusalem. Many times, Metropolitan stresses that Catholic means universal. He was well aware that many people actually equated the term Catholic with Latin or Polish, so this had to be understood well by his people. In some of his writings, Metropolitan Sheptytsky stresses again and again the meaning of the Church and her unity. The Church, as he says, is a witness to the truth. That is why the truth is that fundamental element for the Church's unity. The Church's mission is to proclaim the truth, to preserve the truth, and to remain in the truth. Part of that mission is also to call others to the truth, so the unity can become greater and greater. In Andrey Sheptytsky's mind, the Church has been teaching this truth uninterruptedly throughout the ages. For him, the question of truth is closely connected with the gift of infallibility of the Church as given to the highest authority, the Pope, the successor of Peter. It's thanks to this gift of infallibility, that is the inability to err in the matters of faith, that our faith becomes intelligible and we can inquire into the mysterious and the unknown. In this way, our intellectual capacity of getting to know is illumined by the grace of God. Sheptytsky takes an opportunity to stress the role of the Pope in veiling over the unity of the Church and protecting the unity together with the truth that the Church has been teaching. In the question of papal primacy and infallibility, he comes to the following conclusion, I'm quoting, "From what we said above, it is clear what the role the primacy of the Roman popes and their infallible magisterium have had for the unity of the Church in history. Similarly, as the Church's dome covers the Church's building, protects it, makes it one whole structure, the same is with the authority of the Roman popes. It makes the Church one and whole. By the will of God, the Pope is the visible head of the whole body, representing to us its invisible head, Jesus Christ." End of quote. It must be noted that in putting forth his arguments, Sheptytsky uses a very gentle tone and language. His language, unlike the language of the contemporary Catholic hierarchs and theologians of his time, is not the triumphalistic language. Rather, it is a language of love, humbleness, and gentleness. In his letter, Metropolitan Andrew tries to show that universality of the Catholic Church can and should be explained in other terms than those which are scholastic and jurisdictional. Sheptytsky certainly understood that the language of the communion of saints, the language of the Pope as a divinely appointed pastor, would be more accessible and accepted by his own faithful. As Lubomir Huzar put it in his commentary on this pastoral letter of Sheptytsky, I'm quoting, "The need for the unity of the Church can be well explained through the unity of teaching. In this way, we can see unity as the main characteristic of the Church. Real unity comes about when people feel the need for it, not when it is imposed on people. In this context, the concept of unity is acceptable for those who are not in unity and who have been brought up in the spirit of Eastern theological traditions. In such a way, there is a balance between external and internal unity. Unfortunately, oftentimes, too much attention is given to the external unity, and this fact it draws away even those Orthodox who have very good intentions." How did Sheptytsky see the role of Eastern churches in the work for unity of the churches? In an article published in the authoritative journal Studion in 1926 under the title Le rôle des Occidentaux de l'Our de Lyon des Églises, Sheptytsky tries to go back to the root of the problems of division, but saying that although the schism of Photius in 1054 divided the Church, it never instilled in the hearts and minds of the faithful an idea of negating church authority, like the Protestant Reformation did in the 16th century. This kind of schism was never actually willed by the faithful. For this very reason, even at our times, church authority is still a very respectful body for the faithful. Just a quick drawing between the present times and what Sheptytsky said. According to the statistics in Ukraine, the church authorities and the religious organizations do have the most respected authority in the country. In his article, Sheptytsky also mentions some reasons why some Orientals decided to turn to the unity with the Catholic Church. First of all, their decision was their own decision, not dictated by anyone. It was done out of free will. Secondly, the decision was largely based on the fact that it was easier and surer to have one's Eastern identity preserved rather than staying outside the union with the Universal Church. This might seem paradoxical, but this is what those who signed the union hoped for, to preserve their Eastern identity and traditions while united with the Apostolic See. In regard to mutual knowledge and understanding, which should be promoted by any possible means, this is what Sheptytsky actually says. Among the many groups of Russians, even among the ones who considered intellectuals and part of the intelligentsia, it is not well known that it is possible to become Catholic without becoming Latin. For Sheptytsky, this is a problem within the Catholic Church as well. For many centuries, the Church has projected universality as something proper to herself. In some cases, nations seem to equate its nationality with Catholicity, and this has caused harsh reactions by other nations. For many Orthodox, the Catholic Church in the Eastern Europe seemed just a Polish Latin Church. In Metropolitan's own words, already the fact itself of the existence of a Catholic community of the Oriental Eastern Rite for many people would be something very interesting and useful to discover in order to understand the universality of the Church. As Sheptytsky says, the Catholic Church has understood the danger of such approach, and he gives examples of Pope Leo XIII, who issued many encyclicals and apostolic letters forbidding any missionaries to proselytize among Eastern Catholics to change their rite. Sheptytsky has three theories of unity, or what he calls the return of Russia to the Catholic unity. The first theory explores the possibility of Eastern Church joining the unity while preserving her traditions and liturgical customs, as was the case of the Ruthenian Church joining the Catholic Communion in 1596. The second theory implies Latinization, and the third theory underlines one's freedom of choice to choose and to follow any rites he or she wants. It goes without saying that only the first theory and the first way is a legitimate one. What about the Western Christians, the Catholics? What attitude should they have in regard to unity and the role of the Eastern Catholics in this process? According to Sheptytsky, the Western Christians also have a great task. Catholics should unite themselves in carrying out this task because no one nation can actually have monopoly in this regard. Eastern Catholics cannot stand out as a unique or special, but as experienced and useful for those who need advice and encouragement. If someone would like to understand the mentality of Eastern dissidents, he has to come to the Eastern Catholics and ask them the question of how is it possible to become Catholic and at the same time to remain within one's own tradition and peoplehood. Eastern Catholics have indeed preserved their qualities of peoplehood and even its negative sides as well. Also, because they have preserved their mentality, they can be seen as heroes. Shortly before the World War II, Sheptytsky initiated a dialogue with the Orthodox clergy and intelligentsia, who were quite willing to enter this dialogue, but unfortunately, due to the war, this initiative did not go further. Part of their correspondence had been also published, and his courageous act of defending the Orthodox in 1938 and his idea of not wanting to subordinate the Orthodox made his unionistic or ecumenical activity quite attractive to some of the Orthodox brethren. As regards the Orthodox and their understanding or misunderstanding of the union, this is what Sheptytsky wrote. I'm quoting, "I believe I have observed correctly that the Russian dissidents are mostly afraid to be reminded of the Ruthenian Union. In their minds, to become a uniate means to lower oneself to a level not acceptable either by the Church or by any human being or institution. Even if there are those among the Russians who would like to join the Catholic Church, they would rather become Latin than Uniate and accept Uniatism, knowing in what kind of conditions they will find themselves as Uniates. Honestly speaking, the conditions in which Ruthenians have found themselves in their own country is so miserable that they are looked down upon as a scarecrow which scares away the Orthodox. End of quote. Metropolitan Andrey realized how deep the anti-unionistic feelings were in Russia and how much of that was a result of many complexities. He even quotes one of the Russians who plainly says that the Greek Catholic hierarchy is not regarded the same way as the Latin clergy, and they have no credibility in the eyes of the Orthodox. In an introductory word to his published materials of correspondence with the Orthodox, Sheptytsky says, "Our brethren, the Ukrainian Orthodox, know about us from the Russian literature and brochures, whose aim was to cause as much hatred as possible against the Roman Church and especially against the Uniates who left the Orthodoxy. It was impossible that any Russian teacher or priest would present an objective and true picture of the Catholic Church." End of quote. In light of this, Sheptytsky calls the Catholics, Eastern Catholics, and the Orthodox to learn more about the other, respect each other, and to work together on the cause of unity. In 1994, John Paul II expressed a similar idea using a beautiful analogy of the river. He wrote the following: "The whole history of Christianity appears to us as a single river, into which many tributaries pour their waters. All of us, Western Catholics, Eastern Catholics, and the Orthodox, are invited to gather with renewed fidelity and ever deeper communion along the banks of this great river, the river of revelation, of Christianity, and of the Church, a river which flows through human history, starting from the event which took place at Nazareth and then at Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. This is truly the river which, with its streams, in the expression of the psalm, make glad the city of God." What are the shortcomings of Sheptytsky's view on ecumenism? The concept of unity of the Church that Sheptytsky had in mind is not something that can be accepted today in ecumenical circles. For him, at the heart of unity is a return to the Catholic Church. It is not, however, a conversion to new faith. He never saw return to unity as a conversion. In fact, when he spoke at a conference in Brussels in 1925 on the theme Psychology of the Union, he emphasized that the words conversion and schismatics should not be used in any type of dialogue. The terms are totally contrary to the true spirit of unity and to the spirit of Christian charity. At the same conference, Metropolitan Sheptytsky insisted that when we talk about unity, we should not have in mind individual adhesions to the Catholic unity, although he valued every single person who joined the union. But rather, the Catholic Church should have in mind communities, parishes, eparchies, and even the whole body of the Orthodox faithful. This is the best way to achieve unity. And this is what he said in regard to individuals or communities joining the Catholic unity. I'm quoting, "Certainly, individual adhesions to the Catholic faith bear great importance for us because every soul has an infinite value. However, individual adhesions, whatever numerous they would be, would never have the same effect as adhesions of groups of communities." To make his point even stronger, Sheptytsky jokingly even uses what he believes to be a Hindu proverb that says the following: "A Hindu will become Christian when his village will become Christian. And the village will become Christian when the tribe will become Christian. And the tribe will become Christian when the whole nation will become Christian." When Sheptytsky uses the word conversion, he actually refers to those who have not been baptized. In this prophetic vision, when unity between Catholic and Orthodox will be achieved, it will be possible to unite common forces and to bring to Christ all nations in Asia, he writes. In a unified church, we will need to revive the Catholic fullness on the Oriental East, and that will be the time when the whole universal church, with the help of its local communities and with the help of God's grace, will be able to convert to the true Christian faith the nations in Asia Minor. Obviously, in order to accomplish such a great task, the help of all Catholics will be necessary. This is something that all orders, religious congregations, priests, laity will be able to work on together. End of quote. Interestingly, when Sheptytsky writes about the faith of the Eastern faithful not in union with the Apostolic See, he states that although the Orthodox do not have the certain teachings proclaimed as dogmas, They often interpret such teachings in a manner similar to dogmas. For instance, in regard to the dogma of the Immaculate Conception, he says the following: "Those Eastern churches which do not recognize the magisterium and the teachings authority of Christ's minister, they recognize the Immaculate Conception, but not as a dogma. They also recognize many truths of faith and dogmas from the first 7 councils that took place before the division." It seems that Sheptytsky does not raise the question of recognizing dogmatic teachings of the second millennium by those who would join the Catholic Church in our times. Another interesting point: if we trace the understanding of unity by Sheptytsky from his very early years as a bishop till the last year of his life, we can see that there is a noticeable shift. Whereas in the beginning of his ministry, he regarded unity as something that separated brethren should achieve by returning to the Apostolic See. That is, he stressed more Petrine authority and teaching linked to the Apostolic See. In 1943, in his decree on the Union, Sheptytsky expresses a more theological and Christocentric concept of unity. This is what he writes: "It is clear as the light of the sun that unity among Christians is nothing else but unity with and in Jesus Christ. And because of this, it is also the most sacred page of their soul and life. It is the source of their happiness, measure of their gifts, and the only support of their hopes. In contrast, separation and division is the worst danger in the life of a Christian, because it leads to be left without Christ." The contribution of Metropolitan Sheptytsky to modern-day ecumenical dialogue is great. At the end of my presentation, I would like for a few minutes to concentrate our attention on the ethical and social teachings of Metropolitan Sheptytsky, and this is linked with another type of dialogue among religious or interreligious dialogue. Whereas in the ecumenical dialogue, the goal is to reach the full visible unity of the churches, the goal of interreligious dialogue is not a theological consensus, but rather it is a search for common ethical grounds as the basis for our societies. As St. John Paul II said, religions can never agree theologically, but religious leaders should strive to work on commonalities among their religions, promoting authentic values inherent in their religions to make a difference in our societies and lives of the people. As was said above, Sheptytsky's work on the rapprochement of the churches merits to be studied, deepened, and taught today. His efforts in bringing the Catholics and the Orthodox together, his numerous pastoral letters, meetings, personal letters, and homilies are an invaluable source and an example for us today of how to be persons engaged in dialogue. Charity, humility, and respect are the main virtues of Sheptytsky. He truly deserves to be called a giant of the 20th century. As regards interfaith dialogue of Sheptytsky, we must say that this dialogue was a dialogue which consisted in practical acts of charity towards members of different religions. Of course, here we have in mind his tremendous work in saving the Jews. This was a great practical dimension of his interfaith cooperation. The ecumenism of today, and especially the interreligious dialogue, oftentimes is colored with the defense of the dignity of the human person and his or her rights. Metropolitan Sheptytsky, in his written works, has developed a twofold system of ethics: an ethics of law, rules, commandments, obligations, and an ethics of virtues. Within the ethics of law, Sheptytsky described his understanding of society, order in society, religion, and human institutions. For him, the ethics of virtues constitute the basis for the ethics of law. Within such system of ethics, Sheptytsky delineated some basic concepts which are diametrically opposed to each other: the concept of good and evil. The laws made in our societies should be based on the concepts of promoting the good and protecting from the evil. However, human beings, as created in the image and likeness of God, are capable of differentiating between the good and the evil by their intellect. The image of God and likeness of God is nothing else than our capacity for God, capacity for love. According to Sheptytsky, the goal of our lives should be the growth in virtues. He says, "Moral life of people with natural virtues is a constant heroic effort. It is never a mechanical repetition of our duties." In other words, if we want to build virtuous and just societies, first we must be virtuous and just ourselves. Interestingly, when Sheptytsky talks about sin, he stresses that no matter how personal the sin is, it will always have effect on our society and community. Analyzing a difficult history of his own people, Sheptytsky believed that if we want to build a just and unified society, we must have freedom of choice. Freedom is fundamental. Of course, this freedom must be an informed freedom of choice. Any type of misinformation or propaganda cannot have any place in forming one's conscience. Here comes the importance of family. For Sheptytsky, family is the basic unit of any society. It is within the family that children learn how to love and obey their parents, how to love and respect one another. According to Sheptytsky, relationship within the family should become a measure of relationship within the state. The worst thing that can happen to a human being is to lose his faith, because without faith, man starts to doubt himself, people around him, and he has no hope for any bright future. The importance of faith and an ethical upbringing of children constitute a fundamental element in building peaceful and just societies. To end my presentation, I would like to quote what Sheptytsky summarized to be the goal of his whole life. The whole purpose of my life and work was to gather people under the flag of Christ. For me, the flag of Christ is the teachings and life of Christ, which has been an orientation compass in my life. And even if I'm to die today, my greatest achievement in life would be to see all of you saved.